Alright, Vaal Righteous Fire Trickster mini build guide. Let's go. So, the basic idea behind this build is taking Vaal Righteous Fire and scaling it to the point where we can use that skill entirely without using regular Righteous Fire at all, and still end up with a very powerful, very fast map clearing build. So I'm going to pop in a Bone Crypt, which is a decent map for the build. It's a nice indoor map, but the layout can sometimes be a bit troll. And show off a bit of how it plays before getting into the details of how to set it up, how to play it, all that good stuff. So right away you can kind of see there's this awkward point at the start of every map where I'm trying to fill up my Vaal Righteous Fire, and that part is a little weird to play, but once you get it on, it is really nice. And you can basically, if you run good layouts, keep the Vaal Righteous Fire going for essentially the entire map if you time it right, if you clear well, and if the map doesn't troll you with like super dead ends. But also right away you can see that Vaal Righteous Fire has a much larger AoE than regular Righteous Fire. It also has more damage base, about 30% more damage. So just right off the bat, it is stronger than normal Righteous Fire in a pure numbers comparison. But it has the other advantage in that once you turn it on, you don't need a bunch of life regeneration to sustain it. You see I cast and it sacrifices a chunk of my ES and my life, but then I just kill some mobs, heal right back up, and it's not doing anything to me for the rest of its duration, which is really nice. And I kind of just zoom around through these maps. Even though I haven't played this character in I think 3 or 4 days since I unfortunately ripped it to a really silly mistake. It's pretty easy to map with once you kind of get a feel for the rhythm of using the skill and the timing between the Flask and the Vaal Righteous Fire itself. And there you go, pretty solid map clear overall. Really fun to play, and ends up being very tanky, I would say, once you get that initial, past that initial Righteous Fire charge to get the whole thing going. But for anybody looking to maybe try this build out, I will say right away, this I would recommend more as a kind of second character slash reroll build. It's probably not going to be great as your first build, or if you haven't really made it into maps yet. The build doesn't cost a lot. It's not really a budget issue. You can get it started on a pretty moderate amount of currency since it's using a lot of life energy shield hybrid gear, as you might have guessed by looking at the life and the ES values. So that stuff's not too expensive, but the leveling before you can really go full Vaal Righteous Fire is a little bit awkward. And then also trying to do your map progression, your Atlas progression, wouldn't feel great because the build does falter quite heavily on certain types of layouts, ones where you have to backtrack a lot, and really functions best once you get to that like shaped map meta where you can kind of pick and choose what maps you want to run. Do things like Bone Crypt, like Underground Sea, or even like Mausoleum or Atoll, where you're not really going to be backtracking. So just keep that in mind. And then I will get into the gear itself. So, like I said, pretty straightforward for most of it. Life, ES on all of the main armor slots. Not really looking for too much else besides whatever resists you can hit with them. You do need a 6-link. Ideally, you don't need one, but it's useful compared to a normal Righteous Fire build where you don't really care that much past 4 or maybe 5. Since we are socketing in increased duration as well as efficacy to just maximize how long the Vaal Righteous Fire lasts. Jewelry is pretty much the same deal as the other stuff, just looking for ES and life and res. ES and life and res. The only two, I guess, items that really stand out. Belt, Mostly normal, but I would say getting a Flask mod of some sort, either reduced charges used or increased charges gained, is going to be really nice because it ensures that even if you do some reduced Flask charge maps, you'll be able to keep your Soul Catcher Flask up as often as possible. And then the other item is I currently have a multi-modded Shape Receptor. If you've seen any of the Jug RF builds that were popular last league during Bestiary, it's basically the exact same weapon. The big point of it is to get that supported by Blood Magic, as well as getting all the damage modifiers, since don't really have any mana open to cast things, so I'm using Blood Magic to sustain the cost of the Scorching Ray itself. Then for the flasks, Quicksilver, pretty straightforward. Sulfur Flask, kind of just some damage and a little bit of regen. It's okay. You don't really need to use this one, but I like it for especially the start of the map when I'm sitting still scorching. I can pop that for a little bit of safety. Assault Flask for defense, Divine Flask for Divine Flask. And then we got the big flask, the Soul Catcher. Now, what you're going to be looking for on this one is, most importantly, you need that Vaal skill soul gain prevention. You need that one as high as possible. So a perfect 40% roll is going to be really, really nice. Since what's very important about that is the 40% reduced soul gain prevention duration actually gets scaled by increased flask effect modifiers. So it actually goes even higher. It goes to about 50%. So it's cutting the cooldown essentially in half. And that is pretty massive because the base cooldown for getting souls on the Vaal Righteous Fire is 12 whole seconds. And right now, mine only lasts 13.7 seconds. So without this flask, I would only have like a second and a half to refill the entire Righteous Fire. Whereas with this thing on, I've got like 6.5 seconds, 7.5 seconds. Much easier to manage that. And then I guess also I should note, you probably want some Chaos Res here and there. I've got 2 items, I think, with it. You don't need a crazy amount like the some of the Occultist Righteous Fire builds where they run, only a few thousand life and way higher ES. Since I am sitting at 5,900 life, so I could take some Chaos hits, but it is going to be nice, especially in the Incursion League. That Chaos Res is just mega, mega valuable. Yeah, I think that covers the gear, so back to the mapping side of things. Like I had mentioned, you really want to avoid layouts that have mostly extensive backtracking if you can help it. That's why you really want to do shape maps on this build, I think. It's more of a specialized farmer in that sense. Because if you have to track all the way through a map, kill all these mobs, and then you end up hitting a dead end, you have to turn all the way back. That time turning back is eating away at your Righteous Fire duration, and you may not have your next one charged up yet. And then you can end up with these awkward spots in the middle of a map where you have mobs to kill, but you don't have your Righteous Fire up against. You have to go back to the Scorching, which is much slower. Yeah, once you get that first Vaal Righteous Fire off, if you are in a nice, more linear layout, you can just keep it going the whole way through. Also, in general, I would say it takes a lot more paying attention on this build than at least most builds I've played while mapping, because you really have to constantly pay attention to your souls on your Vaal Righteous Fire to see whether it's up or not, or whether it can gain souls again or not. You need to pay attention to your Soul Catcher Flask. Make sure that it is always active. You never want to press Vaal Righteous Fire without it active, so it's always up when you press Vaal Righteous Fire. And then you also need to pay attention to your current Vaal Righteous Fire duration, which shows up top on your buff bar. Yeah, so moving on, we've got, I guess the gems would be a good thing next in the weapon. I showed it before. It's a Scorching Ray setup. Helps with boss DPS, helps you get your first Vaal Righteous Fire up. Pretty mandatory on that one. And then helmet, I have shield charge, fortify, faster attacks, normal shield charge stuff, and then I also put a decoy totem in here that I would pop down on harder bosses. In my shield, I've got, I think, all my auras, Arctic Armor, I guess 2 of them, Arctic Armor, and then Blasphemy, Ellie Weakness. In the boots, I've got the Cast and Damage Taken set up, Duration, Immortal Call, and there's my Discipline, so that's my other last aura. And then the gloves have the Orb of Storm set up, Arcane Surge, or Critical Strikes, and Flame Dash, so that gets you your Ellie Overload procs. And then I've just got some Abyssal action going on in the belt. But for the passive tree, this is where the build really starts to kind of show the second part of its power over regular Righteous Fire builds. I am not invested pretty much whatsoever into life regeneration like a regular RF build would need just to sustain their skill. I've got some here and there where it's just good nodes anyway, but really it's just I'm getting life, I'm getting damage, I'm getting energy shield. And then I've got, like I mentioned before, the Flask effect, I've got Ellie Overload, and I've got the 2 skill duration clusters. But then that allows us to end up with a much higher effective HP pool and a much higher amount of damage investment on the tree compared to your normal RF build, on top of the Vaal RF already dealing just more damage base. And it just melts through the maps that much quicker. The jewel sockets are pretty important. You need to grab at least 3 of them as soon as you can. 2 of them are for the Atziri's Rain Jewel. This is from a possible outcome of corrupting any Crimson Jewel. It just gives extra Vaal skill effect duration. Ideally, you want a high roll. I think both of mine are 19%. Yeah. And then also a Sacrificial Harvest. This one's not mandatory, but I felt it helped a lot for basically getting your first Vaal Righteous Fire up sooner. Because, it's like 30% faster to get that first one up. So that's less time sitting with Scorching Ray being slow. And then I don't think I have any other jewel sockets on my tree now, but you either on your tree or if you get a Stygian belt, it's really nice to grab a chance to gain onslaught on kill effect from either a Murderous Eye or a Searching Eye Abyss Jewel, since that'll boost up your speed a little bit as well. On the ascendancy side of things, we are a trickster. So I've got, obviously, the damage over time stuff, Patient Reaper. This is how I heal, killing the mobs, and it gives a little bit of damage. Prolonged Pain, another damage boost, and a skill duration boost. Swift Killer, more damage, more speed. Pretty much a lot of this is just damage and speed, and that's why it's more of a mapper build than your normal RF. Tricksters are just really fast in general. And then I've also got Weave the Arcane for free movement skills, and it's got a little bit more attack and cast speed. So what's important about this, originally I had been using Ghost Dance, but I ended up in a situation with using this flask where you can't gain mana during the flask effect. So you pretty much have to either blood magic your skills, that's where the blood magic on this comes in, or it has to be something that costs very little. So the Orb of Storms, the Decoy Totem, they're fine, they don't cost a lot. But shield charge spamming while I couldn't gain mana, I would run out of mana if I didn't blood magic it. But if I did use blood magic, I was constantly spamming a blood magic skill, and then my ES recharge could never start. So the whole benefit of this node almost is based off the ES recharge start. That 40% attack speed was just massive, but you can't use it if you're using blood magic to constantly stop your recharge. So Weave the Arcane ends up making the skill free. Don't need blood magic. ES can recharge. It's a little bit slower, but it works a lot better with the Soul Catcher Flask overall. And yeah, that covers that. If you use an upgraded Flask, you can use Ghost Dance instead, but I prefer the Soul Catcher over the upgraded version for at least this skill specifically. And then we've got, for the bandits, killed them all. No bandits. Don't need to help them. Just get those 2 points. Much more powerful than any of the other options. The Pantheon stuff I've been running, I think pretty much exclusively I ran Lunaris and Growth Cold. Lunaris is just extra speed and really good for mapping in general. And Growth Cold just kind of works against everything as the minor defensive node, since we don't need any of these specialized nodes. I think that covers the whole build, setup, end game. And that's all the important stuff. Real quick, I'm going to swap back over to one of my characters on Incursion where I can show some leveling stuff with how I leveled the character. Because if you are leveling on the Incursion League, you've got some really powerful options. Namely in the temple modded items. So I leveled with Cold Snap from, I think it's level 16 that you can use the skill. I used that all the way up until like level 70. It was a lot of fun. It was really fast. The single target was kind of low at times, but Cold Snap plus Vaal Cold Snap was a really interesting and different leveling experience. But really what makes it possible, one, obviously a tabula. 6 links are just going to be really strong, especially on spells. But these temple weapons, so you can see this wand requires level 6. And it has 76 spell damage. So it's got a temple mod that's 70 to 74 spell damage. You can also get one that's 70 to 74 cold damage if you do the cold snap route. They're both really good. But basically you want to look for those because the temple special modifiers don't have level requirements. So you can find them, or if you farm low level temples, you can get them yourself. It can be on like wands or scepters or daggers, I think. But aside from that, you've also got the Sacrificial Heart, which is a new unique, adds a ton of flat damage. That's not only flat damage for attacks, it does work on spells. Ends up being really strong. And then the String of Servitude belt, which is basically a gold rim on a belt. So you put this and a gold rim on. And you're capped res from 2 items. Other options to wear are Le Hoop, pretty just good in general. Tassalio's Sign, it adds a lot of flat cold damage. This one really helps against boss DPS. And then I've got a couple more temple modded items. A mana ring, which just helps with mana costs early. I think I dropped this around like level 30. And also temple modded life rings, which are T1 life with some percent life. And those, again, don't have a level requirement. So these are like level 20 rings with just pretty much all the life that you need to cover your leveling. And then the only other item really worth mentioning is Loctonial Caress. Just, I mean, you use them on basically every build while you're speed leveling. Attack speed, cast speed, charges are all very, very strong, especially with Cold Snap. Every extra bit of Frenzy Charge generation that you can get is really nice for helping with the cooldown. And then, yeah, you just kind of pop in the Vaal Cold Snap, kill all the trash mobs with the dot, and spam on the bosses. I think the links I ended up using while I was leveling for the Cold Snap was Vaal Cold Snap, Controlled Destruction, Elemental Focus, which, yes, you can't chill, but it's a crazy damage multiplier. Efficacy, Hypothermia, which, again, doesn't do a ton off the hits for the chill, but it made the dot stronger, so it cleared faster. And then I believe I swapped between faster casting and increased AoE, depending on what I needed. And that got me all the way to Blood Aqueducts. And once I was scaled into some of the skill duration, the Vaal Cold Snap was even solo farming Blood Aqueducts. It was really, really nice. I would recommend that for sure. And I think with that, I've got everything covered. Hopefully, I got all the basics of the setup and how to get it leveled up to the end game. If you have any questions about the Vaal Righteous Fire build, feel free to ask in the comments. I don't think I'm going to be playing the character anymore because I did, unfortunately, rip it to standard, and I have so many other builds that I do want to play over just leveling it again. But it was a fun build. I really enjoyed it. And that's all I got. So thanks, guys, for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Later.